Hey, everybody. Welcome in. It is a late in the week edition of the HOUTOPIA football podcast. I am Sean Pendergast, one half of Payne and Pendergast on Sports Radio 610. Good to be with you, as always, recording this on a Thursday early afternoon, whenever it is or wherever it is you're listening to it. I certainly appreciate that. You can download the Odyssey app to listen to this podcast if you're getting it somewhere other than the Odyssey app, since Odyssey is kind of the parent company of this podcast, I would say. Or if you're watching on YouTube or Twitch, certainly appreciate that as well. We've got some Texans stuff to get into here. This will not be a long one today, but just wanted to kind of keep the train moving here as we get towards free agency on Monday this week, this coming week. Monday at 11 a.m. is when the legal tampering period begins. So before we get into all the podcast, a quick reminder to, if you haven't done it already, stop right now what you're doing, hit that subscribe button. And that makes sure that you get the podcast automatically. You don't have to seek it out. You don't have to find it on Twitter or anything like that, or on social media anywhere. You'll get it automatically. Give us a rating. Give us a review as well, however you feel about the podcast. That always helps the engagement too. And obviously, you can listen to me 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. weekdays with Seth Payne on Payne and Pendergast on Sports Radio 610. And like this podcast, you can watch that on YouTube as well, or on Twitch. The show is. So if you feel like watching Seth and I do the show, it's a lot of you are choosing to do. That's really, really cool. So that's where you can find me during the week. But we're getting into it now, man. We are deep into the week leading up to, I call this salary cap setup week for a lot of teams. And the Texans are definitely one of those teams. If you missed it earlier this week, they restructured Nico Collins' contract to clear up $9.8 million in cap space. The Texans are still operating, as of this recording at least, they are still operating with an amount of cap space that really only allows them to do nominal types of things. They re-signed Dario Gumbawala yesterday to a one-year, $2 million deal. I just got a push notification from Aaron Wilson on my phone that they re-signed Kurt Heinisch to a one-year deal that maxes out a little above $2 million. Now, these are two players that I'm not sure if they make the team. So they've been good role players for the team the last few years, and they may very well make the team. But these are low level moves. That's all the Texans are really in position for right now, with about 15 million in cap space that they have this minute. So we'll talk about what all that means. This wide receiver market that's gotten very, very interesting. Texans have a need at wide receiver. There's a lot of big names out there, but this is not 2024 where they had the wherewithal and the cap space to go do that. So we'll talk a little bit about that on the podcast. I want to talk about the division a little bit too as we head into free agency next week, and where exactly we know where the Texans sit in the division. They're two-time division champs, and I haven't seen anything out of the other three teams yet that would indicate that the Texans shouldn't be the favorite, probably a noticeable favorite in the division. And then just a few more items on the stadium, the potential new stadium down the road. As most of you know that listen to this podcast, Mike Toman, the new president of the Texans, was on in studio with me and with Seth on Tuesday this week and had some interesting things to say about that. I've talked around to a lot of people about this stadium situation, and I've got a few bullet points in my mind. This is just based on everybody I've talked to, some people that are very much in the know and involved in this thing, as to where I feel my own opinion, as well as some information as to where we are and where we're headed with the stadium issue. Again, this stadium's probably not front burner in terms of how it impacts the near term, but it's a very big topic right now in the aftermath of hiring Mike Toman to be the president of the team, a guy who clearly has a heavy stadium background on his resume. And again, if you missed the podcast earlier this week, or if you missed the interview, I would say go out of your way to go find the interview on the podcast for Payne and Pendergast for the station on the Odyssey app. It's a really good conversation. I think people are really going to like Mike. Really good dude. And coming in at an exciting time for this franchise, certainly a time where there could be a lot of change afoot with the venue in which the Texans play. So as far as where we are with the Texans right now, after the Nico Collins restructure, we're at about 15 million in cap space. The Texans, to me right now, are operating with the need to address in free agency. I would like to see them address wide receiver in free agency and the draft, offensive line in free agency and the draft, defensive line, however you address that, whether it's bringing guys back, signing guys. But they're in position right now where they're not in a mode, I don't think, where they're going to make the huge moves I think that some folks would like them to. Certainly none of the guys who are there are the two franchise tagged players. Only two players got franchise tags in the entire league this year. T. Higgins with Cincinnati and Trey Smith with Kansas City. These are both positions of need for the Texans. Trey Smith, one of the best guards in football. T. Higgins, a very good wide receiver who is probably going to benefit greatly from being on his second franchise tag if indeed the Bengals can work out a trade. If I had to guess, I don't think the Bengals are paying T. Higgins top of market because they're getting ready to pay Jamar Chase top of market. And I don't see the Bengals being one of those teams that are going to, like the Eagles are right now, where they're just signing everybody back, but they're shoving all the money into these future dummy years that are going to come due at some point. Jeffrey Lurie, the owner of the Eagles, operates very differently than the Brown family does that owns the Bengals. So my guess is that T. Higgins is a tag and trade candidate. If I had to guess with Trey Smith, based on the fact that Joe Thuney was just traded from the Chiefs to the Bears for a 4th-round pick, that's a prelude to them trying to find some sort of deal with Trey Smith. I don't think the Texans are in on either of these two guys. I don't think the Texans are in the business of trading draft capital this year for the right to overpay somebody. Anybody who has T. Higgins on their mind or Trey Smith on their mind, wipe it out. You're wasting time. You're wasting brain energy thinking about either of those two being Houston Texans. To that end, I would say this, that the wide receiver market that is starting to burgeon up here, that's starting to get more and more interesting names on it, DK Metcalf it looks like Seattle is going to try to grant his wish for a trade. Devontae Adams was released by the Jets. I think Devontae Adams still has something left in the tank. We're waiting on Cooper Kupp to either get traded or released by the Rams. That's a very interesting one for the Texans because of the tie-ins to Nick Caley, the new OC, who was with the Rams. He was in the building with Cooper Kupp the last couple of years. Chris Godwin's a top free agent. Stephon Diggs could come back here. Those two guys, to me, are sort of in the same boat where they both ended the season on IR. When they're healthy, they're excellent. But who knows what their health situation is. And Diggs obviously was a Texan last year. It's almost a different kind of situation than the other guys we're talking about here. But those are 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are 5 names, veteran, recently productive wide receivers. Deebo Samuel's off the market now. He's a Washington Commander. And I would say if I were sifting through those names, I think I'll start with Diggs. The odds are out on Diggs where it's plus 110 that he comes back to the Texans. So the favorite is that he's going to leave and go somewhere else. I think people are going to be surprised at what kind of market Stephon Diggs has just based on how weak this free agency market is for the wide receiver group. And B, his injury is not one that I think will scare a lot of teams away. It's an ACL. He may get a late start in camp. We know that he's not somebody you have to worry about in terms of practice habits and things like that. Now, his legal situation is very intriguing. And for those who don't know, he is suing a couple of women who he is saying tried to extort him. There's some physical violence involved that he's saying he was hit by one of the women. One of the women involved, who's a reality TV star, Mulan Hernandez, is saying that Diggs hit her and that Diggs is lying. So how much does this factor in with how teams treat Diggs, specifically the Texans, in free agency? I guess we'll learn more next week when we see exactly how strong or weak Diggs' market is. So Diggs, I've been on record saying I want Stephon Diggs back as a Houston Texan at the right price. Chris Godwin, I think, is going back to Tampa Bay. I don't think that one's even worth entertaining, although the Texans were fairly high up the odds board to sign him if he weren't to go back to Tampa Bay. The other ones are intriguing to me. Cooper Kupp, I would wait for him to get released by the Rams before trading for him, because not only are you trading draft capital, you're trading into a contract that at least right now is $20 million a year. Part of that is a $7 million bonus he's due. So there's a timing element with Cooper Kupp. I like the player. I don't like his injury history. Look, all these guys are imperfect in some way, or else they'd be on a team making $35 million a year, happy as clams. But there's issues. Godwin and Diggs, there's age with Diggs and injury issues with both of them. With Kupp, it's age, it's injury issues. And the Rams have said it's highly unlikely he's going to be back with them. So Kupp is going to be on the move, whether it's a trade or whether it's getting released and thrown out there into street free agency. The other two are the two that, to me, are playing at the highest level right now. Devontae Adams' numbers may have been down a little bit last year just based on his situation. He was with the Raiders, then got traded to the Jets. We know that Aaron Rodgers loves to target Devontae Adams. I'd have to go look. I just know the games I watched Devontae Adams play, he still looked pretty good. he was released by the Jets. So he is a street free agent right now that could sign with anybody. He doesn't have to wait till Monday if he doesn't want to. If he wants to go get the money right now, he can. The only ones that have to wait until next week are the ones who are actual guys whose contracts are expiring. The Jets cut Davante Adams, so he can sign anywhere he wants to right now. If I had to guess for the Texans, and make no mistake, a combination of Nico Collins and Davante Adams is very, very interesting to me. But if I had to guess, Davante Adams is probably going to be priced out of the Texans range. Not by much, maybe, and I don't see him being on that train. He's 32 years old, so he's not getting a 4 or 5 year deal or anything. But I could see some team throwing a big 1 year deal at him with some voidable years on it to spread the pain out a little bit, or a 2 year deal, kind of like the deal Danielle Hunter signed with the Texans, where it was 2 years, about $50 million, but almost all of it was guaranteed. I could see something like that with Davante Adams, which to me would probably price him out of the Texans. As far as DK Metcalf goes, I'm out on that one for 2 reasons. One, the Seahawks are reportedly looking for a first and a third round pick for DK Metcalf. That's a non-starter for me. And then he's in the last year of his deal. So whoever trades for him is going to have to pay DK Metcalf. Let some other team do that. Let some other team be the one trading first-round picks for the right to overpay a guy. I think he's a good player, but he's not a guy that I would give up multiple high picks for and then go ahead and pay. The Texans just aren't in position to do that. If the Texans, a team like the Patriots might be in position to do that. Now, the Patriots aren't giving up the 3rd overall pick. They would be silly to do that. But I could see the Patriots, their 2nd round pick is fairly high. You could maybe sell the Seahawks on, that's the equivalent of a 1st round pick. Maybe instead of a 1st this year and a 3rd, you go like a 2 this year and a 2 next year, that kind of thing. So I think you can find common ground, and I bring them up because they've got $100 million in cap space. They're a team that can give a 4-year, $120 million contract to DK Metcalf if that's what it takes. The Texans aren't one of those teams. So I say all this to say that all these wide receiver names, if I had to handicap it, of those 5 names that I just gave you, if I had to handicap the likelihood that they wind up a Houston Texan, I think I would put Cooper Kupp number 1 if he gets released. I would put Stephon Diggs number 2. He'd be number 1 if he didn't have a legal situation involved right now. He's number 2. And then the other 3 you can throw into any order you want to. I just think they're all high. Godwin, Adams, Metcalf. I think they're all highly unlikely for the Houston Texans. So Kupp being number 1 is interesting, and I'm curious what you guys think about this. And if you want to email the show, let me remind you that you can email the show, houmailbag@gmail.com. I kind of threw this at Seth at the end of the show today, just impromptu, because there was news that Jonathan Allen, the defensive tackle for the Washington Commanders, could get released if they can't find a trade partner for him. He's another one of these guys that's asked to be traded. More and more, man, the NFL guys are asking to be traded. It's getting to be more and more like the NBA. It's gotten interesting. The NFL by far has become the most interesting offseason of any of the sports, and it's not really close. But with news that Cooper Kupp could get released, Jonathan Allen could get released, Kevin Zeitler is going to be a free agent guard that's played for a handful of teams, most famously the Cleveland Browns and most recently the Detroit Lions. He was a big fixture on that really good O-line last year. He's 34 years old, but I don't really care with offensive linemen. That position group tends to age pretty well. I kind of threw this at Seth and said, look, man, if you wanted to do a 1-year prove-it deal for Cooper Kupp, that he can stay healthy, a 1-year prove-it deal for Jonathan Allen, that he can prove that he's still the man. And if I was Allen, if I was any defensive lineman and I'm going to a team to play on a prove-it deal, I'm coming to the Houston Texans to play for DeMeco Ryans. Whatever the saying is, like, this is where so-and-so goes to die, it's the opposite for defensive linemen playing for DeMeco Ryans. That's where you go to live and thrive and go get more money. So Cooper Kupp on a prove-it deal, Jonathan Allen on a prove-it deal, and Kevin Zeitler on, say, a 2-year deal, for an aging guy who's still playing pretty good football, and I think would really bring a level of professionalism to that offensive line room. What would you guys think of that? To me, they all feel like guys who are going to be in a price range where you add it all up, and I think the Texans can cobble their way to an amount of cap space where they could make those types of signings. I think you'd probably need to get to maybe 30, 35 million to do those deals and other deals you're trying to do. I think something like that is reasonable. Now, maybe change the names around a little. Maybe there's a defensive lineman, a different one that you guys would look at. But I think the Texans are going to have to bargain hunt a little bit. They're going to have to find guys that were a little like Dalton Schultz a couple years ago, who just couldn't find the market he wanted. So he played a 1-year prove-it deal. and then got a deal that right now I think Texan fans wish the Texans hadn't paid him, but whatever. Those are the types of guys you're going to have to find. Almost like versions of like the Eagles. This is an extreme version, but like them with Zach Bond last year. Zach Bond had a 1-year, $3.5 million deal, and he was the best linebacker in football last year. I'm not saying you need to do that, but what I am saying is you're going to need to find some cheaper guys. You're going to need to get some wins on the margins here if you're the Texans when it comes to free agency. That's the type of free agency it's going to be for the Texans this year. It's not going to be giving Azeez Al-Shire the payday he's been waiting for. It's not giving an aging Danico Autry $10 million a year. It's not giving Danielle Hunter $48 million guaranteed. It's not trading for Joe Mixon, then giving him a 3-year extension. Those are not the types of moves you're going to see from the Texans over the next 4 or 5 days. You're going to see more moves like the ones I'm proposing here that are going to be, they're going to be deals where the Texans have to have done their homework, their evaluation, and feel like they're getting bargains here. That's just the way it is. Anybody who's swinging for the fences right now with some of these tippy-top guys, it's fun to talk about, but you're talking about stuff that is not going to happen, which is really all sports talk is. It's hypotheticals. I'm just telling you, like, sometimes talk like that gets people's hopes up, and I'm basically here to dash your hopes. I'm sorry that if you're looking to get Devontae Adams, it's probably not happening. And if it does, I'm happy to be wrong. Even if it happened and it felt irresponsible cap-wise, I can get myself to a place where very easily where I'll get excited about it. You guys know I'll get excited about almost anything. But when I assess things through this lens and I'm looking at what I think is going to happen, that's really what I'm here to do in this podcast. That's what kind of offseason I think it's going to be. So that said, the other teams in the AFC South are operating maybe with a little bit more ammunition than the Texans are. I don't think the genesis of this thought that I had today was actually that I'm about to convey to you in a moment was Sam Darnold and Sam Darnold's availability, and that Sam Darnold has become the domino we all need to wait to fall in free agency at the quarterback position is incredibly fascinating to me, and probably means that Kevin O'Connell deserves some sort of medal of honor of some sort to get this type of year that he did out of Sam Darnold to where he's viewed as not a savior necessarily, but I do think Sam Darnold is viewed by a handful of teams as the gateway to competitiveness. Bad teams. I think he's viewed as that by the Raiders. I think he's viewed as that by the Giants, although the Giants are in on Aaron Rodgers too. I can't believe I'm saying this. I'd rather have Sam Darnold than Aaron Rodgers based on the entire package, drama and all, smugness and all. Even with that big fat face of his, Sam Darnold, I'd still rather have him. But I think the Giants, I think the Raiders, I think the Tennessee Titans, and this is where I'm going with this. I think that Sam Darnold is viewed as a ticket to relevance and competitiveness by a handful of these QB needy teams. There's really like 6 teams that are truly, truly in the quarterback market. It's the Titans, it's the Browns, it's the Giants, who are all picking 1, 2, and 3. It's the Jets. It is the Raiders, and it is the Steelers. Now, the Steelers look like they're going to pick between one of Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. It sounds like it's going to be Fields, which I think is the better choice of the two. But those are all 6 teams right now whose quarterback situations are very much in a state of flux. Sam Darnold could be a ticket to competitiveness for at least 3 of those teams. And in the AFC South, and I'll throw the Colts in there too as a 7th team. Anthony Richardson, you cannot count on him at this point. And even Chris Ballard has said he wants to create competition at quarterback. The AFC South gets really interesting if Sam Darnold signs with either the Colts or the Titans, or if Aaron Rodgers signs with the Titans, definite possibility, and Sam Darnold were to sign with the Colts. It's not marquee level quarterback play, but it's some damn interesting names for sure. I mean, I still think CJ's still the best quarterback in the division at that point, in my opinion. Even better. He's better than, I know Darnold had a good season last year. I'll take CJ Stroud over Sam Darnold. So would any of the teams in this division. But that gets very interesting with veteran quarterbacks on all 4 teams, as opposed to the last couple of years, which has been Trevor Lawrence being the most seasoned of all the quarterbacks in the division. But it raises the question for me, is there anything that any of the other 3 teams in the AFC South can do over the next 7 weeks, free agency and the draft, that would make them the favorite over the Houston Texans in the division. Quarterback drives narrative. Quarterback drives the betting markets, all those things. So it would have to involve some change at quarterback. I don't think the Colts, who to me are the second most talented team overall in the division, the Jags are already set with Trevor Lawrence. They're going to roll with him. The Titans, I think, are just too far behind. The Colts are the interesting one that if they were to sign Sam Darnold there, I know he doesn't quite fit what Shane Steichen does, although Darnold, I think, is a little underrated athletically. But, Shane Steichen is looking to do the Jalen Hurts, Anthony Richardson type stuff, it would seem. But what the signing Sam Darnold, the signing a quarterback, can any team in the division go get a quarterback that, along with several other good moves, make them the favorite in the division? I don't think so. I think the Texans are untouchable. They're off-season untouchable right now in the division. I think the Colts, who have the best roster, could sign Sam Darnold, crush the draft, make a big free agency move or two. Unless the free agency move is one that is sizzly, like if the Colts were to somehow get T. Higgins to go with Sam Darnold, that would certainly create a lot of buzz. The Colts were very competitive already with the Texans last year in both of the games that they played. Although that first game in week 1, they needed, 4 50-plus yard plays just to hang around in that game. But I say all that just to kind of lay out where we are with the Texans right now in the division. They're in a good spot. They're going to make moves themselves. Like the Texans are going to come out of the draft and free agency having felt like they improved the team in some way. I can guarantee you that. So it's not as though the Texans remain stagnant. It's not as though the Texans are a team that are shedding guys right now. Not every team improves in the offseason. Some regress because you can't keep everybody. The Texans, even with the limited cap space they have, I think are going to be a team where it feels like they've filled in some holes and have not created other holes. So they're going to improve. Can the other teams keep up with that improvement and even supersede that improvement to become a favorite in the division? I don't think so. I'm curious what you guys think, though. If you want to email the show, and we can discuss this in the mailbag episode on Tuesday, houmailbag@gmail.com. I think the only thing that gets somebody caught up to the Texans is solving quarterback imminently, not with drafting Shedeur Sanders. I'm talking about signing Sam Darnold, signing Aaron Rodgers, and then making moves that people feel like are buzzworthy and good and solid. So Texans are in a good spot right now. All right, last thing before I wrap up the stadium situation. We had Mike Tillman, the president of the Texans, on Payne and Pendergast earlier this week. Excellent conversation, and he kind of laid out where things are with the stadium. It's very preliminary right now. The things that Mike shared that are important are that we're still 7 years away from the lease being up. Now, there will be stadium talk well before that 7-year mark, obviously, but nothing is imminent right now. And as of right now, their number one priority, the number one option is trying to take NRG Stadium and make it a better version of itself. From talking to people and just my own common sense, re-listening to the conversation with Mike, and then just knowing what's become so important with stadiums in the last several years, and we discussed this with Mike Tillman, stadiums are different now than they were. What's considered state-of-the-art or important, I should say, is different now than it was 25 years ago when NRG Stadium was built. When NRG Stadium was built, retractable roofs, modular playing surfaces, things like that affect the operation of the stadium in terms of how it functions on game day were much more important. We were coming out of an age where the stadiums were very much cookie cutter. If it's indoor, it was artificial turf. It was like concrete, all those things. Getting those up to speed and the premium seating and suites were all important. Now it's the premium seating and suites have gone from this level of from being important in a new stadium to being the thing in the new stadium. Getting people in the stadium that get this amazing experience, either in the regular seats, but certainly in the seats where corporations and individuals are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, on suites every single year. The ability to have multiple levels of suites where you have choices for people with premium suite seating, and then maybe a couple tiers below that of luxurious suite seating, but not quite as luxurious as the Mac Daddy, that kind of thing. Field level suites have become a big thing. You guys know this from watching games that take place in other stadiums, in places like LA, places like Arlington, the field level seating is huge. My biggest thing is I don't know how that gets done. If they're trying to create as immersive and fan-friendly an experience as the Texans are talking about right now, as Mike Toman talked about on my show, as Mike Toman is accustomed to seeing himself when he's worked with stadiums like Jerry World and SoFi Stadium in previous stops in his career, I have a really, really hard, I'm not an engineer, so take my opinion for what it's worth. I have a hard time seeing NRG Stadium getting to that level, being able to create that type of atmosphere, being able to create a 5-star suite and regular fan experience. And some of it's just logistics. I don't know when they would do these renovations to NRG Stadium, given the fact that the rodeo runs in the spring and the Texans are running in the summer and the fall, concerts and things like that as well. Graduations, high school football, all those things that take place at NRG Stadium. The biggest thing being the Texans, though, I know that they don't want to move and be an absentee or be a kind of a gypsy team for a year like the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be as their stadium gets renovated. So not only is there no time on the calendar to do this stuff without making it super unfan friendly and super inconvenient, but I don't think there's a desire to vacate at all. In fact, I know there's not. Jacksonville's going to lose money vacating their stadium. They're going to create an experience that's the opposite of fan-friendly by making their fans drive to Gainesville to go see them. Texans don't want anything to do with that. So that part, as I just think of this logically, I do think a new stadium is going to enter the chat at some point here down the road. And that'll get very interesting because that's when you could start to hear rumors of other counties getting involved. I don't think that's the case. I'm fairly certain the Texans want to stay in Harris County. I know for a fact the McNairs do not want to move the team, obviously, and I feel like I'm stating the obvious. They love Houston. They want this to be a Houston team. And I think that's the other thing too. From everybody I've talked to through this, it does feel like everybody, rodeo, Texans, county, everybody is entering into this very collaboratively. There's nobody entering all this with any animus or any, we need this at the expense of that or anything. They're trying to find the best solution. My gut feeling is it's going to be really hard to find that solution, but that's why I'm not the one trying to do it. These are people who, when it comes to stuff like this, are smarter than me. So I hope they arrive at something. I hope this doesn't become any drama. I'm not as hepped up about for me personally, the fan experience on game day, because I'm not ever down there. My wife is. I guess I should be concerned. She's a season ticket holder. I'm up in the press box, so it doesn't really impact me personally. I just want peace and love and Super Bowls is all I want. And I don't care where they play as long as we have that and as long as everybody's happy. And I think the last thing too is that it'll be the Astrodome and where this fits in all this. Whatever it is the Texans want to do with NRG Stadium is going to require more turf, more real estate, more space. And the Astrodome is occupying, in the opinion of many, a big waste of space over there. So where does that fit in? Is this whole sequence of things having to do with the stadium part and parcel? Will knocking down the dome be part of that? I know there's a lot of people that hope it is. I think there's a lot of people who, if that's part of it, that would get them behind some sort of, ask for public money, that kind of thing. We've gotten plenty of texts from people about stuff like that. So just some things that are kind of floating through my brain as I've talked to people about the stadium stuff. I don't know how interested many of you are in it. It does feel, I will tell you, that on our show, when it gets brought up over the last couple of weeks, text page gets flooded, man. Everybody's got their opinions on this. You're welcome to email me about that and any other topic on houmailbag@gmail.com. All right, so we've got the groundwork laid for free agency. There will be a mailbag episode next week. Probably drop that on Tuesday or Wednesday. I may wait and see how free agency shakes out before I do that episode, but rest assured you'll get a mailbag episode next, coming up in the early to middle part of next week. So for my producer, Jared Rowland, and big thanks to all of you. Again, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Have a great weekend. Free agency almost here. These are the times that are good. Let's go. Have a great weekend, everybody.